It's a modern day classic by Raghav Chandra, a very senior civil servant, additional secretary, Ministry of Culture. And the book is already a bestseller. It is on the scale of Karamazov, Dostoevsky's Karamazov. A fascinating book and very well researched. And basically the idea is of how human beings can come to terms with the most difficult situations and overcome them. This is the underlying idea in the book. And Mr. Raghav Chandra has used the tiger as his motive. So, the pattern is that the tiger too lives trapped, restricted, like man himself. And yet we come to terms, we overcome it. This novel has the disappearance of a Bengal tigress from the famous Kanha forest as an central theme. And it is based on, I never realized, multi-billion dollar trade in wild skins and products. Also, it is the story of human redemption with rare insights into nature, into India's colonial past, and it beats upon the decimation in the process of the tiger. It seems in 1900 there was a population of 1 lakh tigers. And in India today there are 1700 odd tigers. Now, why tigers have been killed so mercilessly and why it is important to save them, the author will tell you himself. During the colonial period it was considered as, a domination, a sign of domination. The Maharajas and the civil servants, the British colonialists, they would organize these shikars and completely destroy the wildlife. Now the point is that the author explains the tiger is the head of the animal kingdom. It's the president of the biotic pyramid. And if it is not possible for us to save the tiger, it will be very difficult to save smaller creatures. And this has very intricate environmental repercussions. Actions, good, bad, corrupt, being rendered or being adjudged according to their essence. The murderous Maharaja, the mercenaries in the forest, the tribals, the Anglo-Indian lady, well-meaning lady, the honest officer, each earns his spurs. And those who have murdered get murdered, those who have done well, it's a theme that emerges. Ultimately, you can query him on it. And in this, I'm not going to go into the story itself, because there are many stories within this book, within this best-selling book. But one point emerges very strongly, that nature, in fact in our Upanishads, I do remember from my earlier days, says that in this world of events and so on, there is a certain inextricable interrelatedness. And you should not, one species should not encroach on the rights of the others. So man is the only criminal, it appears, encroaching on nature mercilessly. From this book also I got the impression that this is the message that is given out, that man must confine himself to within what to his mandate, to what is his. He goes beyond that, then the repercussions are quite awful. There's so many plots in this book, subplots. In fact, many of them could form the basis of a independent novel. But the manner in which Raghav Chandra has brought all these characters, all these places together, it's like a puppeteer. You know, who infuses life into a dead form, makes it dance and sing, withdraws it, form falls dead. Like we would call him in the Urdu language a sahib-e-kalam. Apart from the thought process that he has, very deep thought process, the sheer ability to do it effortlessly, and then this story, that, the other, all these places we are traveling through, the forest, beautiful portraits of the sun sinking in the forest, the wide rivers, the tragic death of a dying animal, or a copulating pair of leopards, or the look in a cheetah's eyes, something that draws you out. And since we are short of time, I'll quickly say just one more thing, that this book is a must as far as I'm concerned. This is the second time I'm introducing it. Once I introduced it in Delhi, it's the second time. And so Raghav Chandra emerges as a grand puppeteer, moving kings. There are many kings, kings and princes and that kind of thing in palaces, gargoyles. It's very frightening also. He emerges as a grand puppeteer, moving kings and paupers easily across the chessboard of time. Thank you very much, and may I suggest, if the book is available, do pick up a copy and get it signed by the author who's come from Delhi all the way to return. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Thank you, Mr. Robin Gupta, for a very generous introduction, both to me, my writing style, and to this book. And I'm deeply honored to have in our midst Mr. Claude Alvarez, whom I had heard many, many years ago in one of my refresher courses at the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy of Administration in Mussoorie, and I know his deep love for the environment. We have in our midst Mr. Edwin Ambu from Singapore, and at the outset I mentioned to him that this is about tiger conservation, and he narrated how interestingly Singapore is bereft of tigers, and the only tigers they have today are in the form of companies. So, yes indeed, and so we're delighted to have him and you, ladies and gentlemen, and students who have a passion for the environment. So I'm going to make it interesting for you. I have a 1-minute video clip and about a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation, but while that is getting loaded, I will tell you give you a brief synopsis of my story, so that whatever I'm talking about will make sense to you. Scent of a Game is set in the year 2006. That was the year when I was posted in Madhya Pradesh as a civil servant. And every day I would open my newspaper, and I used to get a bunch of newspapers. There was a tiger getting either killed or mauled or injured in some part of the country. And the thought of talking about the tiger began at that time, and it took me a couple of years to finalize it. This is essentially a human story. And the tiger I have used, as Mr. Robin Gupta said, as a motive to describe the human situation, because the tiger is also endangered. So are we human beings, our humanity, our sense of generosity towards others, our love for life, everything is endangered today. And we are progressing towards androgynous bionic beings, and therefore our story is pretty much similar to that of the tiger. Coming back to the scent of the game, there is an NRI called Ramchandra Prasad in Silicon Valley, who is a high-flying executive. He's doing extremely well and is tipped to take over as one of the directors on the board of his company called Zenticris. And their company is tied up with a Chinese company called Pan Therapeutics, and they are forming a joint venture company on bioinformatics somewhere in the Silicon Valley. And his promoters are the Raja brothers, both of whom are people who are exceptionally progressive, dynamic, who will do anything to win. And Ramchandra Prasad, while he's part of the celebrations for the joint venture between his company, Zenticris, and Pan Therapeutics of China, during the celebrations he gets word that his father, who lives as a recluse in Amarkantak, which is at the fountainhead of the river Narmada, is on his deathbed and has 48 hours to live. And the earnest request is that he must rush immediately to reach his father. So he rushes back to India, leaves all his important work behind, and his plane has a technical problem at Heathrow Airport. He lands in Bombay and realizes that he has lost his wallet, his laptop has crashed, his mobile is not working, and his suitcases have been sent elsewhere to some other part, and he's without contacts, he's without money, he's without communication. So he hitches a ride all the way to Jabalpur somehow and manages to reach Amarkantak, which is back up beyond the place where the Narmada originates. And when he reaches there, he realizes that his father has already died. But he remembers, and during the funeral, during the cremation ceremony of his father, that his father had said that, his most prized possession was his tiger skin. And it is a 40-year-old tiger skin on which his father meditates and prays to the goddess Durga. And it's a beautifully preserved tiger skin, absolutely brand new. It's as good as new because the father has handled it himself. And he also remembers that when he was leaving his wife, who's a very fashionable heritage photographer and traveler, she has said that the only one thing that I want you to get back from India is that lovely tiger skin your father has. And it has more value for me than any Prada or Louis Vuitton, just get that back. So when they are cremating the father, his first instinct is to cremate that tiger skin which was so beloved of his father, so respected by his father with the father. But the neighbor, Guruji, says, no, you can't do that. There are other instructions. So he said, okay, I'll take it with me for my wife. She desperately wants it. He says, no, you cannot do that. Your father's dying wish was that this tiger skin should be deposited with a conservation museum. So you better go to Jabalpur, where the Forest Research Institute has a conservation museum, and you deposit it with them to be kept with them as a museum piece. Now friends, at about this time, about a week before this, a very famous tigress called Badi Mata, the big female, has suddenly vanished in thin air from the famous Kanha Tiger Reserve. Kanha Tiger Reserve is the holy grail of tiger conservation in India. It is like the Metropolitan Museum. It is like the Prince of Wales Museum. Everything is perfect there and things work. Tigers are conserved. It's part of the famous Project Tiger, which was launched by Mrs. Gandhi in 1973. And this tiger has suddenly vanished. There is no trace of Badi Mata. Politicians have raised a bit of a hue and cry because she was a very famous tigress. The most photographed tigress in the world. And absolutely pure genetic Royal Bengal stock. And there has been no hurt which has been detected on any other tigers or tigresses. So obviously there has been no fight between felines and tigers. There are no dead carcasses. And she has vanished. So, it's out in the papers. Badi Mata has gone missing. Now Ramchandra Prasad goes with his father's tiger skin, which is 40 years old, to the Jabalpur Conservation Museum to deposit the skin. There he meets a very smart young boy with a fat, bulging wallet called Jugnu, who says, you know, why are you wasting your time on the forest authorities? They'll ask you a million questions. My family business is tigers. For the last 4 generations, we've been handling tigers and tiger skins. We export carpets and we're into precious rugs. I can tell you the value of your tiger skin. Please show me your skin and maybe I'll be able to give you some money. This man is broke. He has spent all his remaining money on his father's cremation. His credit cards were in his wallet. His laptop has crashed. He's got nothing. So he's curious. And this chap takes him, leads him to a little dhaba, chai shop in the center of the street. And they open up the beautiful tiger skin. And it's a hot, brilliant Jabalpur sun in the afternoon. And a huge crowd gathers around the tiger skin. And he's explaining him the tiger skin and says, you know, it's been preserved by the famous taxidermist Vanningen and Vanningen of Mysore, and it's 40 years old. It was presented to my father by the famous legendary hunter of man-eating tigers, James Wilson, who was a friend of my father and a colleague of my father. They used to hunt together. And suddenly the police descends. The forest authorities and the police, they do a joint raid. And they said, this must be the skin of Badi Mata who has gone missing from the Kanha Tiger Reserve. And it looks as good as new. So Ram and Jugnu are arrested. A few days later, he is produced before the judicial magistrate. And he argues before the judicial magistrate. He says, my lord, this is a 40-year-old skin presented to my father by the white hunter James Wilson. It's got the label of Vanningen and Vanningen, the legendary taxidermist. So the judge says, okay, show me the label. So he rushes to the skin, the package is opened, and all the lawyers and all the interested parties, they gather around the tiger skin. And suddenly as he approaches the skin, you know, he realizes that when his father's skin had the beautiful smell of incense and agarbattis and herbs, this skin has a absolutely stringent smell of lime and turmeric and vinegar, and it's a fresh, absolutely freshly killed tiger skin. And he's horrified. And the judge says, my friend, this has to be the skin of Badi Mata, the tigress who has been killed. And you have apparently, obviously, been paying. You are an NRI, you are a rich man, you say, you're a big man. You've obviously paid this young man, Jugnu, who has a history of having been in and out of jail 17 times, and you've obviously paid him to kill this tiger, and you are sent to jail. So he goes to jail. Meanwhile, Badi Mata has gone missing from the Kanha Tiger Reserve, as I mentioned, and there is a brilliant and a dynamic forest officer called Gangvardhan Narendra Prem Bishnoi, better known as Ganga, who is sitting in his house, and he's one of the very, very straightforward forest officers who even on a Sunday has been out trekking in the forests, and who returns and suddenly is disturbed by this absolutely beautiful, sparkling, vivacious female Anglo-Indian journalist, Sherry Pinto, who says, look, I have to desperately talk to you about Badi Mata. And he's been trying to keep, along with his boss, the conservator, the Tiger Reserve director, they've been trying to keep this matter under wraps because it's created a bit of a political fuss. And they think that matters will settle down after a couple of days, but she keeps provoking him, needling him, instigating him, to the point where he decides to go on a trek into the area where Badi Mata had last been spotted. And she had a radio collar around her neck, so he leads a posse of forest officers, treks deep into the area, which is dangerous territory, on the road to Bamni Dadar, which is the highest point of Kanha Tiger Reserve, and he detects a dead carcass of a dead cheetal, which has obviously been attacked by a tiger. The horns of the cheetal are absolutely intact, and he also discovers the slashed radio collar of Badi Mata. and which bears the same number as that of Badi Mata, which is RT9. And he comes back, prepares a report for his boss, presents it to the boss, and the director fires him and is very angry because he has done a search operation when he had asked him to keep the matter under wraps. Sherry Pinto, meanwhile, has done a story in the papers about the discovery of the radio collar and the dead Chital carcass, and she says that I'm afraid that the tiger has been shanghaied away to China. And that is, pretty shocking. Meanwhile, he prepares his report, submits it over to his director, and within a few hours, there's a fax which comes on the fax machine, and Ganga is transferred to a very low-profile job as a working plan forest officer at Balaghat, where his job is no longer connected with wildlife, but with timber. He's very disappointed. Now, meanwhile, Ram is in jail and he meets the poacher, Jugnu, and one day he's so dejected that he decides to commit suicide, and that's when Jugnu tells him that, look, I will work a miracle for you, and my boss, Goenka, who is capable of getting anyone out of jail, will get you bail and he'll get you out of jail. So, but you have to befriend Goenka and do a few odd jobs for him. In the end, he becomes a smuggler, an international smuggler, a cross-border smuggler carrying tiger skins and other such derivatives across the border to Myanmar, to Nepal and so on. And that is the beginning of this story. I'm almost halfway through the story, but it takes a lot of curious, unusual turns, and I will pose some questions to you which will keep you wondering about this story so that you will be tempted and excited enough to read about it. Now, the questions which emanate from this is, where has Badi Mata gone? Is she dead or is she alive? Second question, why has Badi Mata been taken away from Kanha Tiger Reserve so surreptitiously? Third, who was James Wilson? If I told you that there was no one like James Wilson, and all along for 40 years, ever since he was born, maybe less, Ram's father had told him that this was a skin of a tiger killed by the legendary hunter James Wilson. And if I told you there was no James Wilson, who do you think James Wilson was? The famous firm Van Ingen and Van Ingen, who had taxidermied this tiger skin, which part of the country were they from? Or which part of the world were they from? Finally, how do you think this story ends? Do you think Sherry Pinto, the journalist, who rubs all the wildlife mafia on the wrong side, and she is constantly writing about the missing tiger, who's talking about endangered species and their trade, the international trade in endangered species, the violations in CITES, which is the international protocol for the conservation of endangered species. Is she going to get killed? Is Gangvardhan Aranyapram Bishnoi, better known as Ganga, the devoted forest officer, is he going to survive? In the end, is Ram going to survive? Or is Ram going to get killed, leaving behind a moral and a story that there is no hope for the human race? So ladies and gentlemen, I leave some of these questions for you to keep you chewing on them, debating them, mulling over them, and meanwhile I will start with a presentation on tiger conservation. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin with a quick PowerPoint presentation on conservation, and I will deal with some of the issues as they are reflected in the book as well. So, center of the game next. As we are aware, the tiger is the head of the biotic pyramid. It is a naturally magnificent and mesmerizing, a beautiful creature, God's own creature, the kind of balance that it maintains, the pride, the dignity that it shows when it prouds, when it attacks,
And all along, as some of us know, it is already the national animal of India, and it was not always the national animal, incidentally. In India in 1973, it became the national animal after the Wildlife Board of India decided that whereas the lion was available only in one part of the country, the tiger was available all over the country. And so they took a conscious decision to make tiger the national animal. It is also the national animal of South Korea, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and so on. Next. These are some of the images. I am not a wildlife photographer, but these are borrowed from friends. This is just to excite your thinking. See how stately and beautiful it is. Look at the balance. Tiger in Indian mythology is the vehicle of the goddess Durga, and what does it symbolize? It symbolizes the annihilation of evil. It is the seat of a meditating Lord Shiva. What does that symbolize? Poise and balance. In the Harappan civilization, which is thousands of years before today, 5,000 years before today, there are rock arts and there are seals containing images of the tiger. In Kerala today we have the famous Pullukali Tiger Festival, which represents a cleansing of society from evil. And even today, and no better than Mr. Thembu to tell us that China, they still celebrate the year of the tiger. So that is the eminence, the preeminence of the tiger as a part of our life. Go on. These are images of Goddess Durga on a tiger, Lord Shiva on a tiger, the Harappan seals showing the tiger. This is the Pullukali festival where they wear these tiger masks. So, all over the world you find people usurping the brand value, the intrinsic, natural brand value of the tiger. You have Tiger Oats today, you have Tiger Air, you have Tiger Balm, Tiger Stores, buy Tiger Beer, records, hedge funds, innumerable. I came across a Tiger Inn the other day, and just about everyone, whether it is writing books or whether it is starting restaurants, they use the word the tiger. Because tiger conveys a sense of strength, of power, a strength of uniqueness, dignity, pride. But as George Bernard Shaw said, man is the real animal. How have tigers disappeared? It was our lust for shikar and hunting, trophy hunting. So there were famous taxidermist companies, Van Ingens, Edward Gerrards, Roland Wards. It was always treated as an outdoor macho sport. So for instance, in the book, Sherry and Ram are talking to each other, and Ram says, well, it's always been, considered a pretty done thing. She says, no. The British came to India primarily because it was the lust of shikar, and it was not so much that the East India Company came here for spices and silks. It was the fact that this was a free hunting zone and the sun would never set on the British Empire. There were no rules of the game, and you could hunt and shoot and kill the way you wanted to. And you had these fancy women in lace gowns who were always very mesmerized by very, very handsome men who had been out in the forest to display their macho spirit, and she referred to it as macho imperialism. As an aphrodisiac, even today you have documented reports of how The tiger is, various parts of the tiger are used as aphrodisiac to enhance manliness. Women all over the world are fond of wearing tigers as trinkets, as tiger claws, tiger paws, and so on. And as Mr. Robin said, at the turn of the century, previous century, we had 1 lakh documented tigers in India alone. And today, there are only 1900. Where have the other tigers gone? Next. So these are some of the images of people enjoying tiger shoots. There was a gentleman called George Hume who has the record of the maximum number of tigers killed. He shot a couple of thousand tigers in his life. The Mughals, the Emperor Jahangir, for him the tiger shooting was his common sport. Just like it would be for a little boy to twiddle on his video console while playing a game. So it was for Emperor Jahangir. Noor Jahan, the light of the world, for her, it was important to shoot a tiger to display how courageous she was. And it was only because of that she was able to retain her place in the harem of Emperor Jahangir. Otherwise, he was ready to throw her out. Tipu Sultan, the Maharaja of Mysore, used to hunt tigers barehanded, and he was a strong man. And there are lots of stories connected with that and with the Maharajas and Rajas. Go on. So this is a famous statue called Tipu's Tiger, and it's in the Royal Albert Museum in England, and which shows Tipu Sultan made this to deride the British and to show that his tiger could kill a British soldier, whereas he could fight a tiger barehanded. And so the British came back in Rapati when they defeated him in the Battle of Seringapatam. They brought out a gold coin, a medallion which showed the British lion pouncing upon Tipu Sultan and flooring him. Next. These are some images of taxidermy trophies. Now, kingdoms like Bikaner, Bekuntpur, and so on, even today, there are thousands of such mounted trophies. They are ashamed of showing them around because it hurts sensibilities, so they keep it under wraps. And if you actually see those pictures today, you will be horrified. Next. These are famous Britishers. This is Lord Curzon with his bag of tigers. It was never referred to as a hunt or a shikar. It was usually referred to as a bag. It was something which he had done, collected as a trophy. Next. Next. How many do you see in this picture?
5, 6.
5, 6 tigers. Next. And so it was clearly a full day's outing, more than a day's or a week's outing, and the entire office is part of it now. Next. There are many famous people here. Can anyone, let's see how many you can recognize. Any hands up? Prince Philip is there, okay. Who else? Queen of England is there. And Maharani Gayatri Devi is there. Who else? Lord Mountbatten is there. And Prince Charles. Next. This is, I'm told, Lord Ripon or Lord Irwin. Next. Even today, there are companies in South Africa which will allow you to hunt for tigers and so on. Not tigers, but leopards and lions. And there's a huge price tag. It's a curated tour where you are housed. You are picked up from the airport, housed in hotels, taken around, and given a license for shooting. And it will cost you anything from $25,000 to $65,000 for a black rhino. And an elephant is $65,000. Next. These are leopards. Sorry, cheetah. And this is an elephant which was shot by a famous film actor. Next. And this is the picture of the King of Spain. He's no more. May his soul rest in peace. And it created quite a public outcry when he was pictured having shot an elephant, African elephant in Africa. Next. These are tusks. Next. Next. The black rhinoceros. And this is the managing ledger. Vaningen and Vaningen, none of you answered. Anyone wants to answer quickly where it is located? They were located right next to you in Mysore. They were Asia's biggest taxidermists, and this is just one of the ledgers from 1933 to 39, 7 years, but it's all recorded. And they taxidermied in 100 years, between 1899 to 1999, 50,000 tigers. So if they taxidermied 50,000 tigers and 200,000 leopards, so you can imagine how many were actually killed, because so many people did not have the wherewithal to send them all the way from, say, Barabanki or Unnao or Tehri, all the way down to Mysore. So how many thousands of or lakhs of tigers were actually killed? Next. This is the Vaningen stuffed trophy. Next. These are some more. Next. Next. Today you have some African chieftains still up to wear these skins. Next. This is the famous, can anyone tell me who this is? Who this model is? Kate Moss. Next. This is the Cartier leopard. Next. Next. And these are two American senators who are still in service, who are still senators, displaying a tiger skin that they bought, so heaven knows where they procured it from. And they had the gall to actually display themselves. Of course, they got quite a rebuke from the media, but that they, even in today's times, they had the audacity to show themselves posed this way. This is just 2 years ago. Next. So in 1973, the Project Tiger was founded. 2006 was the year when tigers actually started disappearing, and Sariska was without tigers. And that was the year when I started conceiving my story, which was completed some years later. And that was the year when the National Tiger Conservation Authority was founded, and government decided to repopulate Sariska and Panna, where it was found that there were 0 tigers. Next. Today, internationally, we have Java and Bali tigers wiped out. 90% of their habitat has been reserved. Only about 3,000 tigers are left globally. And what is known as the protocol for the conservation of traffic in endangered species CITES, based out of Geneva, the Chinese have been making a very, very strong attempt to relax the CITES regulations. And so the book covers this in very, very great detail and talks about captive tigers and how cloning is going on. I've given you some hints of where Garimata has gone, incidentally. These Chinese have been trying to relax the Article 12.5 of CITES, according to which all the skins and derivatives from tigers, of the thousands of tigers that they have in refrigerators, can be sold legally if Article 12.5 is relaxed. But environmentalists fear that this will allow trade in tigers to happen more freely. Next. These are some of the tiger farms and captive farms. Next. So, what are the threats to the tiger? A diminished habitat, a fragmented habitat, disaggregated poaching, organized poaching, as has been mentioned in this book. Next. So, what are the lessons from history? The last cheetahs in India, 75 years ago, and in center of a game we have the Maharaja of Baikunthpur, who incidentally he shoots the last cheetahs even after 2 decades of their being declared extinct in India. And somehow in a chance encounter he comes across 2 cheetahs. Actually there were 3. The real life story is there were 3, but I've taken 2, so that the real Maharaja of Baikunthpur doesn't sue me. And it's a male and a female cheetah, and they are copulating, and with a single bullet in the dead of night he shoots them and both die. And he sends his secretary, who happens to be Ram's father, to declare to the Bombay Natural History Society to put it in their records that this cheetah shoot should be chronicled. And the PNHS rejects it and gives them a firing, and there are lots of spin-offs from that which happened. And one small aside story to that is that the Maharaja of Baikunthpur kills the last cheetah, so Ram's father, who's his secretary, asks him, why did you kill the cheetahs when you knew they were extinct? And I'm shocked that you actually did that. He says, you know what happened was that an astrologer many, many years ago had come to my kingdom and said that I'm invincible and invulnerable, and the only way I can possibly be attacked is by a wild and nubile and a sleek animal. So when I saw the cheetahs, I felt like answering back and killing them. Later, one day the Maharaja is, after a torrential monsoon, is sitting out in the sun and his head is being, his hair are being cut, and something falls on his head and he dies. And guess what? That thing that had fallen on his head was a gargoyle which was shaped like a cheetah. So, and what I'm trying to say is that, the cheetahs were last seen in India 75 years ago, and it's still not been possible to get back cheetahs into the natural environment. So once you kill something, once you eliminate something from the environment, it doesn't happen naturally for centuries. Next. This is the beautiful cheetah. It looks like a Turkish knight going for a crusade. The tears around the eyes. Next. Next. So Yajur Veda in fact says, you must not use your God-given body for killing God's creatures. You must preserve them. And in that spirit, I think it is time for me to call it a day. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
So, facts or fiction or based on fact?
It's a fiction which is based on facts. And as a civil servant, I'll be honest, I thought that I could write a little more generously and openly if I was writing fiction. Most of it is fiction. Somewhere, yes, my imagination may have run here and there, but I have researched it well, and everything that I've said can be corroborated with something which is available somewhere.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
How many lions are there left in the Akia forest?
Lions, there are a couple of hundred there. Couple of.
Just brief comment by Claude.
Yeah, Claude.
2-minute comment.
Quite fascinated. I am certainly going to pick this book up and have a look at it. I don't read books anymore. I publish them, but I don't read books myself unless they're exceptionally good. And you have told us an extraordinary tale, and I'm not going to, to deprive myself of reading that in detail.
Thank you very much.